She was already waiting on my porch when I came back from the lake, holding a bright orange paper like it was some kind of trophy. "You've been fined $3,500 for illegal fishing," she announced, smiling like she had just won a prize. I laughed, thinking it was a joke, but she didn't flinch. "This is HOA property. You can't fish without our permission." My jaw tightened. That lake had been in my family long before the HOA even existed. I tried to explain, but she cut me off. "Pay within 7 days or we escalate." I stayed quiet, but inside I was boiling. My little boy had been standing right behind me with his fishing rod still in hand, confused why the lady was yelling. She looked at him, then back at me, and said in a cold tone, "If I see him casting here again, we'll report it as trespassing." That was the moment my patience snapped. She thought she was holding all the cards, but what she didn't know was that the land records and the dam that fed every drop of water into this community were under my name. I didn't argue. I just smiled and said, "We'll see about that." And in my head, the plan was already forming. 2 days later, trucks rolled up to the HOA office with flashing lights. Not police, but contractors under my payroll. Karen came running out waving her arms like she was in charge of the world. "You can't be here. This is private property," she screamed. The crew ignored her and started unloading equipment by the dam. She stormed over to me, her face red. "I'll call the sheriff right now," she threatened. I pulled a folder from under my arm and handed it to her. "Do that, but make sure you tell him who owns this dam." She glanced at the papers, and
By the third day, the manicured lawns that Karen bragged about in every HOA meeting were already turning brown. Sprinklers sat useless, fountains dry, and neighbors started banging on her door demanding answers. "Why are we paying HOA fees if we can't even water our yards?" one man shouted. Another woman held up her dead flowers, furious. Karen tried to spin it, claiming, "He's breaking the law. He cut off our supply." That's when I stepped into the crowd with calm eyes and the same folder of documents. "No," I said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'm protecting what's mine. The dam and the water have been in my family's name for decades. The HOA never owned a single drop." Gasps spread through the group. I opened the papers and let them see the official seal, signed by the county clerk. Karen tried to snatch the folder, but one of the neighbors grabbed her wrist. "So you fined him for fishing on his own water?" he asked, disbelief in his voice. She stammered, searching for words, but there were none left. I looked her dead in the eye and said, "You tried to drown me in fines, so I drained your power instead." The silence that followed was heavier than any gavel. That night, I got a knock on my door. It wasn't a neighbor. It was 2 deputies, flashlights in hand. Karen stood behind them with her arms crossed, grinning like she'd already won. "Arrest him for tampering with community property," she ordered. One of the deputies raised his brow, clearly annoyed at being dragged out this late. I stayed calm and handed them the same folder I had shown earlier. "Before you do anything, you should read this. I own the dam, the water, and the access rights. Everything they've been charging residents for was built on a lie." The deputies flipped through the paperwork, shining their lights over the seals and signatures. Karen leaned forward, trying to interrupt. "He's forged those! He's lying!" One deputy finally looked at her and said, "Ma'am, these are legitimate."
The next morning, the fallout began. Word spread fast. Neighbors were furious when they realized their water fees had been nothing but a scam. A crowd gathered outside the HOA office, demanding refunds. Karen stood on the porch, shouting over the noise, "It's not my fault! He sabotaged us!" But no one was buying it anymore. One man waved his monthly statement in the air. "You charged me $800 last year for water you didn't even own." Another woman yelled, "My kid's school garden is dead because of you." The crowd wasn't just angry, they were betrayed. I stayed at the edge, watching. This wasn't about revenge anymore, this was about truth, finally catching up to her. Then, the county inspector arrived in a marked truck. He walked right past Karen and came to me. "Sir, we confirmed ownership. She's been collecting unlawful fees. We'll be pressing charges." Karen's face went pale. No, no, you can't do this to me, she cried, but the inspector didn't even look at her. Instead, he turned to the neighbors. You've all been victims here. You'll have your day in court, and this HOA will answer for every cent. The cheers from the crowd were louder than any gavel in a courtroom. I looked at Karen one last time and said quietly, "You tried to drain me with fines, but in the end, you drained yourself." Karen's meltdown only got worse. That evening, she marched back to my property, phone in hand, live streaming herself to whoever would watch. "Look at this criminal!" she shrieked, spinning the camera toward me. "He stole our water, ruined our homes, and the county is covering it up!" Her voice cracked as neighbors stepped into frame.
Weeks later, the courtroom was packed. Every seat was filled with neighbors who once feared Karen but now came to see justice. She sat at the defendant's table, pale and broken, while stacks of evidence, fake fines, secret recordings, and county records were laid out for the judge. Her lawyer tried to argue, but every document slammed the truth harder. When the verdict came, it was swift. Guilty of fraud, extortion, and impersonation of authority. Karen was ordered to pay back every dime she had stolen, plus penalties that would bury her in debt for years. The HOA board was dissolved on the spot. Gasps and cheers echoed through the room, some neighbors even hugging each other in relief. As I stepped out of the courthouse, reporters shoved microphones toward me. One asked, "How does it feel, winning against the HOA?" I paused, looking straight into the cameras. I didn't fight for this country just to be told I couldn't fish in my own water. Property rights, freedom, those aren't privileges, they're rights, and no one gets to steal them from us. The crowd outside erupted in applause. My little boy tugged my hand, smiling up at me. For the first time in a long while, I felt peace. The dam behind my land still flowed steady, but Karen's power had finally run dry. A month later, life finally felt normal again. The lawns were green, not because of HOA control, but because neighbors worked together, sharing water fairly. Kids rode their bikes past my house, waving as they went to the lake. Nobody looked over their shoulders anymore. The fear of Karen's fines, threats, and fake rules had vanished like a bad dream. One evening, I sat on the dock with my boy, lines in the water,